The wind swept across the Nebraska plains in late autumn of 1892, carrying with it the scent of dried wheat and the promise of an early winter. The land stretched endlessly, golden fields meeting gray skies at a horizon that seemed to mock those who dared to tame it. This was a place where dreams came to die as often as they came to flourish, where the strong survived and the weak were swallowed by dust and forgotten. Thomas Whitfield stood at the edge of his property, his calloused hands resting on the wooden fence post he'd driven into the earth 5 years ago. At 32, he looked older, lines carved deep around his eyes from squinting against the relentless sun, his shoulders broad, but beginning to stoop under the weight of endless labor. His farm was modest, 80 acres of stubborn soil that yielded just enough to keep him alive, but never enough to prosper. Behind him, the farmhouse stood like a monument to loneliness, a two-room structure with walls that creaked in the wind, and a roof that leaked when the rains came. It was a home built for a family, but Thomas lived there alone. Had lived there alone since his parents died of fever, 3 winters past. The town of Millbrook lay 7 miles east, a collection of wooden buildings and dirt streets where everyone knew everyone else's business. It was there, just 2 days ago, that Thomas had made a decision that surprised even himself. He'd answered an advertisement from a matrimonial agency in Boston, agreeing to marry a woman he'd never met, whose only description was hard-working, decent, and in need of a fresh start. Before we continue with Thomas's story, we'd love to know, where in the world are you watching from? Drop your country or city in the comments below. And if you enjoy stories about real people facing real challenges, make sure to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss what happens next. Trust me, this story takes turns you won't see coming. Now, as the afternoon sun began its descent, Thomas saw the dust cloud on the horizon that meant someone was coming. He wiped his hands on his worn trousers and walked toward the house, his heart beating with an unfamiliar rhythm, something between hope and dread. The wagon that pulled up to Thomas's property an hour later was driven by Samuel Green, the town's postal clerk and unofficial courier for anything that needed transporting. Beside him sat a woman wrapped in a gray shawl, her face partially hidden beneath a worn bonnet. Thomas approached slowly, suddenly aware of how shabby his clothes looked, how unkempt his beard had become. Samuel climbed down first, his expression unreadable. "Thomas Whitfield?" Samuel asked, though he knew perfectly well who Thomas was. "That's right. Got a delivery for you. Special one." Samuel gestured toward the wagon. "This here is Miss Eleanor Hartwell. Well, soon to be Mrs. Whitfield, I suppose." The woman climbed down from the wagon with difficulty, and it was then that Thomas noticed her left leg was twisted, causing her to limp severely. She was thin, painfully so, her face pale and drawn, but her eyes, gray as the winter sky, met his directly, without shame or apology. "Mr. Whitfield," she said, her voice soft but steady. "I hope the journey wasn't too much trouble for you, Mr. Green." "No trouble at all, Miss Hartwell." Samuel pulled a sealed envelope from his coat. "This came with her, from the agency. Says you're to sign here, confirming receipt and agreeing to the marriage contract." Thomas took the envelope with numb fingers. He hadn't expected this. The agency had said nothing about a disability, nothing about a woman who looked like she'd barely survived something terrible. "There's more," Samuel said quietly, pulling Thomas aside while Eleanor stood by the wagon, pretending not to hear. "The agency man in Omaha told me straight. Her family paid them to find her a husband, any husband, paid them to take her off their hands, if you understand my meaning. No dowry for you, Thomas. In fact, they paid for someone to marry her." Thomas felt something cold settle in his stomach. He looked back at Eleanor, who stood with her head high despite everything. Despite the limp, despite the obvious poverty of her clothes, despite being delivered like unwanted cargo. "She knows," Samuel continued. "She knows what her family did. The agency man said she insisted on honesty, wouldn't have it any other way. Said you deserved to know the truth before signing anything." Thomas walked back to Eleanor. Up close, he could see she was younger than he'd first thought, perhaps 25 or 26. There were shadows under her eyes, and her hands trembled slightly. "Is it true?" he asked. "About your family?" Eleanor's jaw tightened. "Every word. My father is a businessman in Boston. When I was 16, I was thrown from a horse. The doctors set the leg badly. It healed wrong." She paused, her voice dropping. "In my father's world, a daughter is only valuable if she can make an advantageous marriage. A crippled daughter is worse than no daughter at all. So yes, Mr. Whitfield, they paid to be rid of me. I won't pretend otherwise. And you agreed to this?" "I agreed to honesty." Her gray eyes flashed. "I won't lie to you, and I won't be pitied. If you want to send me back, Mr. Green can take me to town tonight. I'll find work somehow. But if you're willing to give this a chance, I promise you this. I may be crippled, but I'm not helpless. I can read and write. I can keep books. I can cook and clean and mend. I can't work a field, but I can manage a household. The question is whether that's enough for you." Thomas looked at her for a long moment. There was pride in her bearing, a fierce dignity that poverty and rejection hadn't broken. She reminded him of the wheat that grew in his hardest field, the stalks that bent in the wind but never broke. "Can you start tonight?" he asked. Eleanor blinked, surprise flickering across her face. "You're accepting the contract? Seems to me you've had a hard enough journey. No sense making it longer." Thomas signed the document Samuel held out, his handwriting crude but firm. "Welcome to Nebraska, Miss Hartwell. Let's get you inside before the cold sets in." Samuel departed with a tip of his hat and a knowing look that Thomas ignored. He led Eleanor into the farmhouse, suddenly seeing it through her eyes. The bare walls, the crude furniture, the layer of dust that covered everything. "It's not much," he said. "It's honest," Eleanor replied. "That's more than I had in Boston." That first night, they moved around each other like cautious animals, establishing territories and boundaries. Thomas gave her the bedroom, insisting he'd sleep in the main room as he'd done for years. Eleanor accepted without argument, too exhausted to protest. But before she retired, she stood in the doorway and said, "Mr. Whitfield, I need you to understand something. I didn't come here expecting love or even affection. I came here for a chance at a life that means something. I'll earn my place here. You'll see." Thomas nodded, not trusting himself to speak. After she closed the door, he sat by the dying fire, wondering what he'd gotten himself into. The next morning, Thomas woke to the smell of coffee and frying bacon. He found Eleanor already dressed, her hair pinned back, moving around the kitchen with surprising efficiency, despite her limp. "There were potatoes in the cellar," she said, "and I found eggs in the henhouse. The chickens are glad to have company. They've been lonely." Thomas ate the first proper breakfast he'd had in months, watching Eleanor as she worked. She moved carefully but competently, compensating for her leg with practiced ease. "I need to check the north fence today," he said. "Storm last week might have brought down some posts. I'll inventory the house while you're gone. Make a list of what we need. We don't have money for extras." Eleanor met his eyes. "I'm not talking about extras, Mr. Whitfield. I'm talking about necessities. A farm can't run without proper supplies, and a house can't function without basic goods. I'll prioritize, but I need to know what we have first." She was right, of course. Thomas had let things slide since his parents died, making do with less and less until he barely noticed what was missing. When he returned that evening, Eleanor had a list waiting, written in neat script, organized by priority and cost. She'd also cleaned the main room, swept the floors, and patched 3 holes in the walls with cloth and mud. "The roof leaks in the northeast corner," she said, "and the chimney needs cleaning before winter truly sets in. The well is good, but the bucket rope is fraying." Thomas looked at the list, then at Eleanor. "You did all this in one day? I told you I wasn't helpless." There was no pride in her voice, just statement of fact. "Tomorrow, I'll start on the bedroom and the root cellar. We'll need more preserved food if we're to make it through winter." Over the following weeks, a rhythm developed. Thomas worked the land, preparing it for winter and planning for spring. Eleanor transformed the house from a barely habitable shelter into something resembling a home. She washed curtains he'd forgotten existed, organized the cellar, repaired clothes he'd thought beyond saving. But more than that, she began managing the farm's accounts. Thomas had kept records haphazardly, scribbled notes on whatever paper was available. Eleanor created a proper ledger, tracking expenses and income with meticulous precision. "You're losing money on the wheat," she said one evening, showing him her calculations. "The price the mill is offering doesn't cover your costs. But if you focus on corn and potatoes for the next season, and maybe add some livestock, chickens for eggs, a few pigs, you could turn a profit." Thomas studied her figures. "How do you know all this?" "My father ran a shipping business. I used to help with his books before the accident. After that, he wouldn't let me near his office. Said a cripple would embarrass him in front of his associates." She said it matter-of-factly, but Thomas saw the hurt beneath. "But I remember what I learned." "Eleanor," he said, using her first name for the first time, "your father was a fool." She looked up, startled. "What?" "Any man who'd judge you by your leg instead of your mind is a damn fool. Excuse my language." Eleanor's eyes grew bright, but she blinked rapidly and returned to the ledger. "Well then, shall we discuss the corn?" As autumn deepened into winter, something unexpected happened. They began to talk, not just about farm business, but about everything else. Eleanor told him about Boston, about growing up in a house full of servants and empty affection, about the accident that changed everything. "It wasn't just the leg," she said one snowy evening as they sat by the fire. "It was losing my place in the world. One day I was someone. The next, I was no one, an embarrassment, a burden. Do you know what that feels like? Thomas was quiet for a moment. When my parents died, people in town started treating me different. Like I was already failing, already beaten. Like I was just waiting for the farm to take me under. I see pity in their eyes every time I go to town. So yes, I think I understand. Eleanor nodded slowly. Then we're both trying to prove something, aren't we? Maybe, or maybe we're just trying to survive. Surviving is proving something, Mr. Whitfield. Thomas, you should call me Thomas. Thomas, she repeated. And something in the way she said his name made it sound like more than just a name. Winter hit hard that year. The snow came early and stayed late, piling in drifts against the house and barn. Thomas had never been more grateful for Eleanor's foresight, the preserved food she'd insisted on preparing, the repairs she'd made to the house, the wood she'd had him stack high against the north wall. During the long, dark months, they became partners in the truest sense. Eleanor managed everything inside, while Thomas fought to keep the animals alive and the paths clear. When he came in from the cold, numb and exhausted, she had hot food waiting and dry clothes by the fire. "You're limping worse," he observed one night. "The cold makes it hurt more, doesn't it?" Eleanor's jaw tightened. "I manage." "That's not what I asked." She was silent for a long moment. "Yes, the cold makes it worse. Some days I can barely walk, but complaining won't change it." Thomas moved closer, his voice gentle. "You don't have to pretend with me, Eleanor. Not about this." She looked up at him, and he saw tears she refused to shed. "If I acknowledge it, if I admit how much it hurts, then I'm giving in to it. I'm becoming the cripple my father said I was." "You're the strongest person I've ever met," Thomas said, and he meant it. "Your father was wrong about you, about everything." That night marked a shift. They stopped being polite strangers and became something more. Not quite friends, not yet lovers, but something in between. They talked late into the nights, sharing stories, sharing silences, sharing the weight of their separate loneliness. When spring finally arrived, it brought both hope and challenge. The snow melted, revealing damage to the barn and fences. But it also revealed something else. Eleanor's management and planning had left them in better shape than any spring Thomas could remember. "We have enough saved to buy seed and repair the barn," she said, showing him the ledger. "If we're careful, and if you're willing to follow the planting schedule I've worked out." Thomas looked at the detailed plan she'd created. When to plant what, where to rotate crops, how to maximize the land's potential. It was brilliant. "You did all this?" "I had time during the winter. And Thomas, I've been thinking, we should consider expanding, maybe leasing the adjacent 40 acres from the Morrison property." "Morrison won't lease to me. He's made that clear." Eleanor's expression was thoughtful. "What if he didn't know it was you? What if we created a partnership? On paper, I could be the leaseholder. Women can own property in Nebraska." Thomas stared at her. That's actually clever. "But Eleanor, people will talk. Let them talk. We need that land if we're going to truly succeed." They went to town the following week. Thomas drove the wagon while Eleanor sat beside him, her spine straight despite the rough road. He noticed how she gripped the seat edge when the wagon hit bumps, how her face went pale with pain. "We can stop if you need to rest," he offered. "I'm fine." "Eleanor," "Thomas, please, let me do this. Let me be strong enough to do this." He understood then. This wasn't about the land or the farm. This was about her proving to herself that she could still face the world, could still be more than what her father had reduced her to. At the land office, they met with Mr. Peterson, a nervous man with ink-stained fingers, who seemed uncomfortable with Eleanor's direct questions. "Mrs. Whitfield," he said carefully, "it's unusual for a woman to lease property independently. Is it illegal?" Eleanor asked. "Well, no, but then I'd like to proceed." She laid out her proposal with precision, explaining her plans for the land, showing calculations that proved she could make the lease payments. Peterson studied the papers, then looked at Thomas. "Mr. Whitfield, you're agreeable to this arrangement?" "My wife knows what she's doing," Thomas said simply. The lease was approved, but as they left the office, Thomas saw Henry Morrison across the street, watching them with narrowed eyes. Morrison owned the land they'd just leased, land he'd been trying to sell for years with no success. Now he'd have to watch Eleanor Whitfield, the crippled woman everyone pitied, make that land profitable. Thomas could see the resentment in Morrison's face, and he felt a warning prickle at the back of his neck. But Eleanor was smiling, really smiling, for the first time since she'd arrived. "We did it," she said softly. "We actually did it." "You did it," Thomas corrected. "I was just there for moral support." Eleanor looked at him then, and something passed between them, something warm and electric and terrifying. "Thomas, I need to tell you something." "What?" "I'm happy. For the first time in 9 years, since before the accident, I'm genuinely happy. And it's because of you, because you see me as more than my limitations." Thomas took her hand right there on the main street of Millbrook, not caring who saw. "Eleanor, you're the most remarkable person I've ever met. And if you'll let me, I'd like to spend the rest of my life proving that to you." Her eyes filled with tears. "Are you saying?" "I'm saying I love you. I know we married for practical reasons, but somewhere along the way, I fell completely in love with you. Your mind, your strength, your refusal to give up, everything about you." Eleanor laughed through her tears. "I've been in love with you since you defended me to Samuel that first day. I just didn't think someone like you could love someone like me." "Someone like me? Broken." "You're not broken," Thomas said fiercely. "You're perfectly, wonderfully whole. And I love every part of you." They kissed there in the middle of town, and the gossips had enough material to last them months. But neither Thomas nor Eleanor cared. They'd found something rare and precious, true partnership, true love, built on mutual respect and understanding. The spring planting went well, and with the additional land, their prospects looked better than ever. Eleanor managed both farms with remarkable efficiency, keeping separate ledgers, tracking every expense and income stream. Thomas worked harder than he ever had, but it didn't feel like drudgery anymore. He was building something with Eleanor, for Eleanor, and that made all the difference. But success breeds resentment. One evening in late May, as Thomas was closing up the barn, 3 men appeared in the yard. He recognized them immediately: Henry Morrison and 2 of his sons, all 3 carrying rifles. "Whitfield," Morrison said, his voice hard. "We need to talk." Thomas felt his stomach clench. "About what?" "About your wife and her unnatural ways. About how she's making all of us look bad, managing property like she's a man. Eleanor has every right to lease land. You know that." Morrison spat in the dust. "Rights. Always about rights with you people. But there's such a thing as knowing your place. Your wife doesn't know hers, and it's time someone taught her." Thomas's hand moved to the pitchfork leaning against the barn wall. "Get off my property. Now. Or what? You'll fight all 3 of us?" Morrison's son Jacob laughed. "We're not here to fight, Whitfield. We're here to deliver a message. That lease your wife signed? I'm terminating it. My father may have been desperate enough to lease to a woman, but I'm not. Consider this your 30-day notice." "You can't do that. We have a contract." "A contract with a woman," Morrison said, "won't hold up in court. Not when I explained to the judge how you tricked my poor father into signing it, how your crippled wife manipulated an old man." Thomas's vision went red. "Don't you ever—" But before he could move, Eleanor's voice rang out from the porch. "Mr. Morrison, I suggest you read the contract more carefully." She walked toward them slowly, her limp pronounced in the fading light, but her head was high. "The lease isn't with me personally. It's with the Whitfield Agricultural Partnership, a legal entity registered with the state of Nebraska. Both my husband and I are partners. You can't terminate it without cause, and we haven't violated any terms. If you try, we'll sue, and we'll win. I've already consulted with a lawyer in Lincoln." Morrison's face went purple with rage. "You think you're so smart, don't you? Sitting up there with your books and your calculations, making us all look like fools. But you're still just a cripple who got lucky enough to trap a desperate man." "That's enough," Thomas roared, but Eleanor held up a hand, stopping him. "No, Thomas, let him speak. Let him show everyone exactly what kind of man he is." She turned back to Morrison, her voice steady. "You're right about one thing, Mr. Morrison. I am smart. Smart enough to see that your farm is failing because you refuse to adapt. Smart enough to know that your resentment comes from fear. Fear that if a woman with a crippled leg can succeed where you failed, what does that say about you? Why you—" Morrison took a step forward, but his own son caught his arm. "Pa, don't. She's not worth it." "No," Eleanor agreed. "I'm not worth your anger or your resentment, but this farm is worth my effort. And my husband is worth my love, and that's all that matters to me. Now, I believe Thomas asked you to leave. The contract stands, Mr. Morrison. We'll make our lease payments on time, and we'll make that land more profitable than you ever could, and there's nothing you can do about it." Morrison stared at her for a long moment, his chest heaving with fury, then turned and stalked away, his sons following. Thomas waited until they were out of sight, then turned to Eleanor. She was trembling, her face pale, but there was triumph in her eyes. "That was incredibly brave," he said. "That was incredibly stupid," she corrected. "I've just made a powerful enemy. He was already our enemy. You just refused to back down." Thomas pulled her into his arms. "God, Eleanor, when I saw him threatening you—" "I know, but Thomas, I can't live my life being afraid. I won't let men like Morrison make me feel small ever again." They held each other as the sun set, both of them knowing that the confrontation had changed something. The line had been drawn, and there was no going back. The summer was brutal. The heat came early and stayed late, baking the earth and testing every farmer's resolve. But Eleanor's planning proved its worth. The diversified crops, the careful irrigation schedules, the rotation system she'd designed, all of it kept their farms productive when others were failing. By August, even Morrison's sons were quietly asking Eleanor for advice, coming to the farm when their father wasn't around, desperate to save their failing crops. Eleanor helped them, much to Thomas's surprise. "Why?" he asked one evening after young Jacob Morrison had left with a sheaf of papers detailing a new planting schedule. "He's been nothing but cruel to you." "Because he's not his father," Eleanor said simply. "And because holding grudges takes energy, I'd rather spend on other things. Besides, if I help him succeed, maybe his father will finally see that cooperation is better than competition." But she was wrong about Henry Morrison. The more successful the Whitfield farms became, the more bitter he grew. He began spreading rumors in town that Eleanor was practicing witchcraft, that she was manipulating Thomas, that there was something unnatural about a crippled woman having such success. Most people dismissed the talk as sour grapes, but some listened. By September, Eleanor noticed that some of the women in town crossed the street to avoid her, that conversations stopped when she entered the general store. "It's because I threatened them," she told Thomas one night. "I'm doing things women aren't supposed to do, succeeding in ways they've been told is impossible. It makes them question their own choices. Does it bother you, being an outcast?" Eleanor considered the question. "It did at first, but then I realized something. I'd rather be an outcast who's true to herself than accepted for being something I'm not. I've spent too much of my life trying to fit into boxes others made for me. I'm done with that." Thomas looked at his wife with something close to awe. In just 1 year, she'd transformed not just his farm, but his entire life. She'd taught him to think differently, to plan strategically, to believe in possibilities he'd never imagined. And more than that, she'd taught him what love could be, not just passion or companionship, but true partnership between equals. "I don't deserve you," he said. Eleanor smiled. "No, you probably don't, but you're stuck with me anyway." As autumn arrived, they prepared for harvest. The crops were good, better than good. They were extraordinary. The combination of Eleanor's planning and Thomas's hard work had paid off in ways neither of them had dared hope. They would not only make their loan payments and lease obligations, they'd have a surplus. For the first time in years, Thomas could breathe without the constant weight of financial desperation on his chest. But their success attracted attention of a different kind. One afternoon in late October, a well-dressed man in an expensive suit arrived at the farm in a private carriage. Thomas was in the fields when he heard Eleanor call his name, something urgent in her voice. He ran back to find her standing on the porch, her face ashen, staring at the man as if she'd seen a ghost. "Eleanor, what's wrong?" The man turned, and Thomas saw a face that bore a striking resemblance to Eleanor's. The same grey eyes, the same proud bearing. "You must be Thomas Whitfield," the man said, extending his hand. "I'm Charles Hartwell, Eleanor's father." The world seemed to tilt. Thomas looked at Eleanor, saw the way she'd wrapped her arms around herself, saw the fear and anger warring in her expression. "What are you doing here?" Thomas asked, ignoring the extended hand. Charles Hartwell lowered his arm, his expression unreadable. "I came to see my daughter, to talk to her. May I come in?" "No," Eleanor said, her voice shaking. "You may not. You have no right to be here." "Eleanor, please. I've traveled a long way." "You paid to be rid of me." Eleanor's control shattered. "You told me I was worthless, an embarrassment, that no man would ever want me. You paid strangers to take me away like I was garbage. And now you show up here at my home asking for hospitality?" "No. The answer is no." Charles flinched, as if she'd struck him. "You're right. I was cruel. I was wrong. Eleanor, I've come to apologize. And," he hesitated, "and to ask for your forgiveness." "My forgiveness?" Eleanor laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You think you can just appear after a year and everything will be fine? You think an apology erases what you did?" "No, I don't, but I hope it's a start." Charles looked genuinely pained. "Eleanor, your mother died 3 months ago." The words hung in the air like a physical blow. Eleanor's face went white, and she swayed. Thomas moved to her side, supporting her. "What?" she whispered. "She had cancer. It was quick, at least. But before she died, she made me promise to find you, to tell you she was sorry. She always regretted what we did, Eleanor. She was too weak to stand up to me, and she hated herself for it." Charles's voice cracked. "Her last words were your name." Eleanor was shaking now, tears streaming down her face. Thomas held her close, glaring at Charles over her head. "I think you should go," Thomas said. "I haven't said what I came to say," Charles protested. "I don't care. Can't you see you're hurting her?" "Please," Charles said, looking at Eleanor. "Please just listen. 5 minutes. Then I'll leave and never bother you again if that's what you want." Eleanor wiped her eyes, pulled away from Thomas, and straightened her spine. 5 minutes. Say what you came to say." Charles took a breath. "After you left, I told myself I'd done the right thing, that I'd solved a problem. But then your mother got sick, and I saw what real weakness looks like. She was so strong in her illness, so brave, and I realized that you'd always been strong too, stronger than me, stronger than both of us. You faced your injury with courage while I faced it with cowardice." He paused. "I came here to apologize, yes, but also to tell you that I was wrong about everything. You're not worthless. You never were, and I'm proud of you, Eleanor, prouder than I have any right to be." "Or proud?" Eleanor's voice was bitter. "You're proud now that I've made something of myself despite you? Where was that pride when I needed it? When I was 16 and terrified and in pain, and you looked at me like I'd ruined your life? I know I failed you, and I can never make that right. But Eleanor, I want to try. Not for my sake. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but for your mother's memory. She loved you so much. She would want us to find peace." Eleanor was silent for a long time. Thomas watched her face, saw the conflict there, the hurt and anger warring with something else, something softer. Finally she spoke. "Did she suffer at the end?" "No. She was at peace. She said she'd see you again someday, in a better place, where neither of you would be broken." Eleanor broke then, truly broke, sobbing into her hands. Thomas held her while she cried, and Charles Hartwell stood there looking helpless and old. When Eleanor finally composed herself, she looked at her father with red-rimmed eyes. "I don't forgive you. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But I'll try. For her. Only for her." Charles nodded, tears on his own cheeks. "That's more than I deserve. Thank you. But I need you to understand something," Eleanor continued, her voice stronger now. "I don't need you anymore. I don't need your approval or your pride. I have a husband who loves me, a home I've built, a life that has meaning. I'm not the broken girl you sent away. I'm someone new, someone better. And if you want to be part of my life, you need to accept that." "I do. I swear I do." Charles looked at Thomas. "You've taken good care of her, better than I ever did." "She doesn't need taking care of," Thomas said firmly. "She takes care of herself, and of me. We're partners." Charles smiled sadly. "I see that, and I'm glad." He reached into his coat and pulled out an envelope. "Your mother wanted you to have this. It's a letter she wrote, and there's something else." He handed the envelope to Eleanor. "She set aside money for you, from her own inheritance. It's substantial, enough to expand your farm considerably if you choose, or to do whatever you want. It's yours. No conditions." Eleanor took the envelope with trembling hands. "She did this. She did it years ago, actually. After we sent you away. She told me that if anything happened to her, the money should go to you. She believed in you, Eleanor, always." Charles stepped back. "I'll go now. But if you ever want to write or visit, I'd like that. I'd like to know my daughter again, the real you." After he left, Eleanor sat on the porch steps, holding the unopened envelope, staring at nothing. Thomas sat beside her, not speaking, just being there. Finally, she said, "I don't know what to feel. You don't have to know. Not yet. Part of me wants to hate him, but part of me is glad he came." "Is that wrong?" "No," Thomas said gently. "It's human." Eleanor opened the envelope. Inside was a letter in her mother's handwriting, and a bank draft for an amount that made them both gasp. "My God," Thomas breathed. "Eleanor, this is life-changing." Eleanor finished. She read the letter silently, tears falling onto the paper. When she finished, she handed it to Thomas. "Read it." The letter was heartbreaking. Eleanor's mother apologized for her weakness, for not standing up to her husband, for failing to protect her daughter. But she also wrote about how proud she was, how she'd secretly kept track of Eleanor through the agency, how she'd rejoiced when she heard about the farm's success. She'd known Eleanor would thrive because Eleanor had always been a survivor. The letter ended with a simple plea. "Be happy, my darling girl. Be happy and free in ways I never was." "She loved you," Thomas said. "She really loved you. I know. I wish I'd known sooner. I wish I'd had a chance to tell her I understood." Eleanor folded the letter carefully. "But I can honor her memory. I can use this money to build something good, something that would make her proud." "What do you want to do?" Eleanor looked at him, and there was fire in her eyes again. "I want to buy the Morrison property. All of it. He's going to lose it anyway. Everyone knows he's drowning in debt. I want to buy it and create something revolutionary. A model farm that proves women can succeed in agriculture. I want to hire women who've been told they're worthless. Give them a chance like you gave me. I want to build something that means something." Thomas grinned. "That's ambitious. Is it too much?" "No. It's perfect. It's exactly what we should do." Thomas took her hands. "Eleanor, you asked me once if I saw a future here. I do. I see a future where we build an empire, where we prove that success isn't about being perfect or fitting into society's boxes. It's about hard work and intelligence and refusing to give up. An empire, Eleanor repeated, smiling. I like the sound of that. Over the next months, they put their plan into action. Morrison fought the sale at first, but when Eleanor offered him enough to pay his debts and relocate with dignity, he accepted. The combined properties now totaled over 200 acres, a substantial operation by any standard. Eleanor used the remaining money to build proper facilities, buy equipment, and hire staff. But true to her word, she hired women, widows who needed work, young women escaping difficult situations, women with disabilities who'd been told they were unemployable. Eleanor trained them, taught them everything she'd learned, gave them not just jobs, but purpose and dignity. The town was scandalized at first. A farm run primarily by women? It was unheard of, unnatural. But when harvest came and the Whitfield farms produced more than any other operation in the county, the criticism began to fade. Success silenced doubt more effectively than words ever could. By the time winter arrived again, the second winter of their marriage, Thomas and Eleanor had become something of a legend in Millbrook and beyond. Articles appeared in agricultural journals about their innovative methods. Other farmers came to study their techniques. Eleanor began receiving invitations to speak at conferences about farm management and sustainable agriculture. But for all the external success, what mattered most to both of them was what they'd built together. Not just a farm or a business, but a partnership of equals, a love based on mutual respect and shared dreams. One snowy evening in December, as they sat by the fire, Eleanor said, I've been thinking about something. What's that? When I arrived here, you signed a contract. You agreed to marry a woman you'd never met. A woman who came with nothing but problems. Why did you do it, Thomas? Really? Thomas was quiet for a moment, thinking. I was lonely, desperate. I thought any companionship was better than none. But I was wrong. Wrong how? I didn't need just any companionship. I needed you. Specifically you. I needed someone who would challenge me, who would push me to be better, who would see possibilities I couldn't imagine. I needed a partner, not just a wife, and that's what you've been from the very first day. Eleanor leaned against him. They brought you a wife without a dowry, a crippled woman no one else wanted, and you saw something everyone else missed. I saw you, Thomas said simply. Just you. And it was more than enough, more than I ever hoped for. Eleanor smiled. Do you know what I think? What? I think we saved each other. You gave me a chance when no one else would. But I gave you something too. I gave you hope. I gave you a reason to believe the future could be different. We weren't just lucky to find each other, Thomas. We were meant to find each other. Do you really believe that? I do, because against all odds, despite everything that should have kept us apart, we found a way to build something beautiful. And that doesn't happen by accident. Thomas kissed her then, slow and tender, pouring everything he felt into that single gesture. When they pulled apart, he said, I love you, Eleanor Whitfield, more than all the gold in the world. And I love you, my farmer, my partner, my home. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the fire, both of them thinking about the incredible journey that had brought them here. From that first day when Eleanor arrived with nothing but determination and pride, to this moment where they'd built a life beyond either of their wildest dreams. Outside, snow fell softly on their land they'd fought for, worked for, bled for. In the barn, their animals were safe and warm. In the houses they'd built for their workers, women who'd once been dismissed as worthless were sleeping in security and hope. And in this room, by this fire, two people who'd been told they weren't enough had proven the world wrong. They'd found each other in the vast loneliness of the Nebraska plains, and they'd built not just a farm, but a testament to the power of seeing beyond surface judgments. Thomas had been given a wife without a dowry, but he'd found something infinitely more valuable, a true partnership, a love that transformed everything it touched, and proof that worth can't be measured in gold or physical perfection. As the fire burned low and the night deepened, Thomas held Eleanor close and thought about the future, about the children they might have someday, children who would grow up knowing that their mother was brilliant and capable, and undefeated by the world's cruelty. About the farm they'd continue to build, the lives they'd continue to change, about growing old together, partners, until the very end. He'd thought he was getting a wife out of desperation. Instead, he'd found his soulmate, his best friend, his equal in every way that mattered. And as Eleanor drifted off to sleep in his arms, Thomas whispered to the darkness, Thank you. Thank you for being too stubborn to stay broken. Thank you for choosing to fight. Thank you for being exactly who you are. He didn't expect an answer, but he felt Eleanor's hand tighten around his, and that was answer enough.